What is going on, everyone? It is College Football Talk, and I'm your host, Hunter DeLauder, and today is Week 13 preview. We're going to dive into all the biggest action of this upcoming weekend that has a lot of very high-stakes type games in it, whether it be Ole Miss, Florida, Notre Dame, Army is a massive game. Indiana, Ohio State is the headlining matchup, I think, for most. So we're going to dive into all of it, plus much more, including around the country. We're going to hand out some best bets. We are going to have a winning weekend this weekend. You can count on that for sure. But before all of that, we're going to dive into the college football playoff rankings that just got released yesterday. So I'm going to give my thoughts on that because there's plenty to talk about with that. But again, before all of that, make sure you guys are subscribing to the podcast and just help boosting the channel. We are trying to get to 200 subscribers. So the only way we can do that is to make sure you guys are subscribing. If you're new around here, welcome. This is a solo riding mission by me just to talk college football or whatever else is going on in the realm of college athletics. So make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button, liking, and sharing the videos as well. If you're listening on Spotify, awesome. Just hit a follow there as well. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into it because we have a lot to talk about. So college football playoff rankings came out today. Obviously, I'm going to show you right here. We're a very poor budget type podcast if you're watching on YouTube. So, we have the PDF up. We can't, we're not this big, we're not big business here. So, this is what we got. But again, here are the rankings from yesterday's committee or playoff rankings came out yesterday. Oregon at number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5. So, top 5 stays the same, like it or not. Notre Dame at 6, Alabama at 7, Miami 8, Ole Miss 9, Georgia 10. So that wraps up your top 10. Tennessee falls all the way to 11. Boise State at 12. 13 is SMU. 14 at BYU. 15 is Texas A&M. 16 Colorado. 17 Clemson. 18 South Carolina. 19 and 20 is Army and Tulane. Those two teams will meet in the American Athletic Conference title game coming up in a couple weeks. Arizona State is at 21. Iowa State at 22. Guys, I don't know what else we can do, but Missouri is still ranked. I don't know how much more I can take watching them still get ranked. They don't need to be ranked, and yet they're still ranked. They're not in contention of anything, but there they are at 23. UNLV at 24, and then Illinois at 25. I will talk about Illinois later on in the show when regards to their matchup this weekend and why them winning this weekend is big for a certain team. All right. So we have the rankings here. So I'm going to switch over now as I do. All right, perfect. So this is what the rankings would look like if are in bracket form now. So the first two teams out is Tennessee at 11 and then SMU at 13. So being that because Boise State, which if you look at this bracket right here, they would get the 4th overall seed due to being you take the 5 highest ranked conference champions, but the top 4 highest ranked get those first 4 buys. So Boise State jumps BYU based off where they're ranked, getting that 4th spot, which means Tennessee is the first team out. And BYU would be right now, since they're sitting first in the Big 12, they would be the 12th overall seed, being at 14. But you're looking at some of these matchups right here. Obviously, first thing that jumps to mind is Southern teams heading north. Alabama at 7. Alabama right there would head to Notre Dame. Georgia would head to Penn State, and Ole Miss would also head up to Bloomington to take on Indiana. I don't know about you, but I would hammer Alabama to dominate, Georgia to crush Penn State, and Ole Miss to take care of Indiana. That's just how I would view that. That's completely up to debate, but I just think that would be and then I think I saw someone on FanDuel, Ohio State was a 21.5-point favorite. But if they played BYU today, how about Ohio State though? I mean, that's a beautiful draw right there. Everyone talks about getting those top 4 spots, and rightfully so, but that 5th overall seed is always a money spot because you're going to get more likely than not, you're going to get the less superior conference champion at the 12th spot. And then you're going to get the next inferior one. So Ohio State would get BYU and then get Boise State before even and then before even getting to the semis. I mean, so I would be upset if I was like, an Oregon or a Miami, because you either get Alabama or Notre Dame or Georgia, Penn State go into you. Instead, Ohio State gets to kind of cakewalk right through. But looking at the rankings as a whole and giving my thoughts here, so the top three, obviously, or the top five stay the same, but 3, 4, and 5 is where I'm going to talk about here. I don't understand why they're still there, based off of some other teams behind it. Texas, best win is a Vanderbilt team. And I know a lot of people have been saying it, and I rightfully so agree. Texas needs to probably win out in order to kind of, I think, secure themselves a spot. Right now, if they lost to A&M next weekend, assuming they take care of Kentucky as a three touchdown favorite this weekend, I mean, if they go on the road and lose, regardless, I think, of the score, I don't know how you can justify putting them in, because based off of just the schedule they were dealt and the big games that they played, what's their best win? A Vanderbilt team that's possibly is going to go 6-6 this year? A Florida team that they smoked, but without DJ Lagway? What's the win? Michigan's no good. Your big games, you lose. You lost at home to Georgia, and then if you assume that they lose to A&M, there's your next big game. So what else is there to show? Nothing. Penn State, they better not lose the rest of the way. Again, like, they're kind of secured in if they just don't lose. But I just don't understand why they're as ranked as high as they are. What's their best win? Illinois at 25? They better hope Illinois doesn't lose this weekend, because after that, what's next? USC, who's 5-5? What about, or I don't know, USC? Geez, I mean, Wisconsin? There's nothing. There's nothing there. And then you have Indiana. Indiana, they have and I have a picture of it. Indiana has the 106th strength of schedule in FBS. They have 0 top 25 wins. Their best win is probably Michigan. Again, Michigan? Is that Michigan and Texas, or Texas and Indiana best wins Michigan, who stinks this year? Is it Washington maybe? I mean, again, you're playing and dominating the schedule you were dealt. You can't control that. But assuming that they lose this weekend, I just don't see how you can put them in. I understand what the record is, and they're taking care of business. But if they get blown out this weekend, and so the point spread's 13.5. We're going to talk about it here in a little bit, the game breakdown. If they get in there, I think if they lose by the point spread or more, you can't justify them being in. This notion that they should get moral points, victory points, even if they lose, and still have a say into what happens, I just don't understand it. That's not part of the committee's job or criteria. The committee has a job to put the 12 best teams in. You cannot, and I mean you cannot, just be awarding sympathy points. Well, you played well. You still lost. And it was like I don't know. Ohio State wins 38-21. Yeah, but you played them well, so we were gonna keep you in. No. The hammer has to come down at some point. Indiana just showed you that, I'm not gonna call them fraudulent, but they just showed you that schedule that they've played this year, and the one big game they have on the schedule being Ohio State, that was the rest of the season is kind of like just a flash in the pan almost. Because when everything mattered, when the chips were all in, they did not perform and did not deliver. And that's nothing on them. That's nothing on Ohio State, who they play and beat. But again, the committee cannot be awarding, well, they played them close enough, so we're just going to keep them around. No. You get them out of there. No. We don't. I understand if they go 11-1, perfect. I believe, and I think a lot of people would agree, a 10-2 Georgia, a 10-2 Texas, a 10-2 Ole Miss, a 10-2 Tennessee right now. They would, I think, I don't want to say curb stomp, but I think they would take care of business against an Indiana team wherever they are, wherever they play, neutral site in Bloomington at one of the said SEC schools' home stadiums. I think you would have to put in that. I think you have to know that regardless, your record does not determine everything. You need to look at all the other factors that go into that. And just because you're 11-1 with a terrible loss on your schedule, you know, that doesn't mean that you just get to hop over a 10-2 team that, might have lost a bad game, but they also played a much more difficult schedule and they also have some better wins than you. So, Alabama moving up 2 spots and watching Tennessee dropped to 11 is very, very interesting because, again, remember, Tennessee beat Alabama. Alabama just moved up after beating up on Mercer, and Tennessee falls all the way out. I mean, if you're a Tennessee fan, you better be hoping that A, Army wins, or B, Indiana loses. I think those are you're rooting for. I mean, you're a big Black Knights fan and you're a big Ohio State fan this weekend and kind of rest of the way in a sense because you need one of those two teams to lose, in my opinion. Watching BYU drop out too, I think doesn't help the Big 12 because it really limits them now, I think, to just the one team getting in. If SMU can win out, and if SMU wins, I think wins a close one or loses a close one to Miami, they may have a shot at maybe getting in still. But Tennessee losing, it really bugs me a little bit. Watching them only fall 4 spots after getting blasted by 14 at home, getting shut out on the road against Georgia, where Georgia got blasted against Ole Miss on the road and lost by 18. They fell 9 spots. Tennessee only falls 4 spots. I don't understand that. And Georgia has a number 1 strength of schedule, a much more difficult schedule, and they have much better wins. I don't understand if the committee's just out against Kirby Smart in Georgia or something because I don't know where you justify that. Trying to go through everything. Notre Dame still at 6. I mean, they are where they are, but I just think being at 6 is blasphemy. They should not. I've been saying this because I deep down just think this, that if you lose to NIU as a 3-touchdown favorite at home, you do not deserve to be in. You've showed me all that I need to see, regardless of where you went on the road in the beginning of the year. And A&M, obviously is a much different team from where they started this year than where they are at right now. You told me everything I need to know. You lost to a team that's currently 6-5 and got their ass kicked yesterday. They're 6-5 and 3-4 in the MAC. That's all I needed to know. You don't deserve to be in the playoff. And then also to say that you're playing your 3rd neutral site game. They haven't played a true road game since week 3 against Purdue. They won't. Next week will be the first true road game they have since week 3 against when they go to USC. That is no. We're not. We cannot be letting that slide. Cannot. And finally, I have 2 more things actually. Hold on here. I got a text here. Okay. So Big 12. Kind of briefly talked about it with BYU dropping all the way to 14 and BYU falling behind SMU, even though SMU lost to BYU and it was at SMU. Is the committee's just a giant joke at this point. I think we're not all done through heads like they are. But going back to the Big 12 here. 2 teams, Colorado at 16, Arizona State at 21. Both of them control their own destiny. If they both just win out, I believe they both mathematically would be in the Big 12 title game. And then the winner of that obviously goes to the playoff. So, I mean, just keeping an eye on it. They'll probably more likely than not, both the winner, if those 2 both win out, it'll all likelihood they won't get the top 4 spot unless Boise State falls. And maybe in that, if Army beats Notre Dame, then we'll see how far up Army goes. And if they win out, which means they need to beat, Notre Dame, and then Tulane, and the Navy. There's still a lot to figure out in that spot, but I would lean towards the Big 12 then would have to be on the outside looking in as far as buys go, whoever the champion is. And then we talked about Army and Tulane. Big game. Big game coming up in a few weeks right there because if Boise State slips up at some point, one of those two teams is going to be waiting right there to slip right in. And then finally, Lane Kiffin brought it up this week about two lost teams and how in the SEC and how he's been talking to some coaches that think that the risk is or the reward doesn't outweigh the risk as far as a two-loss team going to the SEC title game and suffering a third loss and then having to worry about the committee not putting them in still. If you make your conference title game, you should not be penalized for losing the game. Unless it's like a Wisconsin, Ohio State type beatdown where Ohio State goes in and just beats you 59-0. Unless it's like that, you should not be penalized for it. It happened last year with the Georgia game against Alabama. Georgia went into the conference title game 13-0. They lost a close game, 27-24. It was the first loss, I believe, in what was it? It was like what were they on? I don't remember. It was 30 straight games or something like that. I can't remember. I mean, they hadn't lost in 2 years. And then they dropped 5 spots and were out of the playoff and had to play in the Orange Bowl, obviously. But they get penalized like that for losing their first game in how many years? And they just get it's if like they had just lost like their 4th game and they just free fall. I mean, again, it happened this year. Fall from 3-12, but Tennessee falls from 7-11. Again, I don't understand. But I completely agree with Lane Kiffin. People will say, well, just win the game then. Okay, well, that's easier said than done. What happens if you lose you play the best game you can, but you just lose like on a fluky play or a walk-off field goal? But that becomes then your 3rd loss. Well, I don't want to. Now I got to risk watching the committee put me out because we'd rather have teams like Indiana and Penn State or Notre Dame who don't play anybody. I mean, Notre Dame has the one winner of A&M. What do they have outside of that? Huh? Nothing. What's their next best win? I mean, is it going to be Army this week? Because outside of that, what is it? Purdue? I don't even know who else they've played. Florida State? They play a bunch of cupcakes. I mean, that's where I'm thinking that if I'm one of these teams like Texas or Georgia or Alabama or Ole Miss, like, I don't want to be worrying about that. I mean, it's great to win the SEC title game. But I'd also don't want to be factoring in, especially, let's just take Georgia here for a second. Let's say somehow they get in. And right now, I don't think they need Alabama or Texas to lose again for them to backdoor their way in if they win out. The committee's already showed that they're going to penalize you. I mean, heck, they fell 9 spots after losing to Ole Miss. And then after you beat the brakes off of Tennessee, you only moved up 1 spot to 10. I mean, what happens if they lose? Let's say they played Alabama again and they lose again. It's my honest belief that they would make it in because that's how the committee is. And then the chairman just says that instead of just saying, listen, we will not penalize teams for earning a spot in the conference title game. They are where they are. Instead, he just goes, we evaluate all teams throughout conference championship week, which means he's saying your spot's not guaranteed regardless of what the outcome is of the game. So there will be some team out there that is going to get punished and just know the repercussions and the outcome of that is not going to be handled very well. And the playoff committee and a lot of these conferences are going to have a mess on their hands because of it. Because as soon as you leave out a team like a Georgia or a Tennessee, who right now is in the outside looking in, or even like an Ole Miss, or, we'll just say those 3, even a Texas maybe, But you let Indiana slide in. If they lose to Ohio State, they're 11-1, but they haven't played anybody. And the one game they had to win, they didn't. You let them walk in, you're going to have a mess on your hands. That's all I'm going to say on that part. So we've talked about too much of that. It's going to move on now. And speaking of Indiana, here as give me 1 second here. I am trying to get back into that. My iPad's right there. All right. Speaking of Indiana, we'll keep talking about them. Might as well just break down the game now. Shoot. Shout out C4. Let's get C4 as a sponsor for the podcast. Love C4. So I'm at the INC right now at the University of Florida, and they're doing auditions out here. So it's kind of chaotic out here, but not in here. It's chaotic in here in this dojo of college football. But out there, it's like the Wild West. So we're seeking shelter, but we're also, embracing the chaos a little bit. Anyway, all right. We have a game to break down. We are in the game breakdown section of the podcast, and it is time for number 5, Indiana, heading to number 2, Ohio State. Ohio State is a 13.5-point favorite. Over-under sits at 51.5. This is Indiana's first real road test, first real test of the season, guys. Guys, it's week 13, and Indiana's finally playing a real team. Shoot. Indiana's coming off a bye week, and Ohio State is this will be their 5th straight game. So if you're looking for little nuggets here, something to keep an eye on. I mean, kind of something like last week, Oregon was going into their 8th consecutive game, going to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin caught them at the right time and almost beat them. Could this be something right here? So, couple questions here, as we always do with these breakdowns. What's the biggest things that need to happen? Either be team by team or just kind of like overall. So here's what I thought of. Which team is going to be able to have more success throwing the football? Ohio State ranks 6th in passing yards allowed. Indiana is 21st in passing yards allowed. So both have really good defenses, pass defense wise. If it boils down to which quarterback you want more, do you trust Will Howard or do you trust Curtis Rourke? Both guys have pretty similar numbers. Ohio State, I don't know which offense identity you're going to get each week. I know what I'm going to get with Indiana. I'm going to get very balanced type offense, running and throwing the football. But Ohio State each week, am I going to get they're going to try their best to just kind of run the football, right it down your throat with those two backs in the backfield? Or am I going to get a team that's just going to try to pass it most downs to all those weapons on the outside? I don't know what I'm going to get. And that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because I'm just very, when it comes down to the clutch moments here, I don't know who I'm going to count on. Am I going to have to count on my quarterback making a big play throwing the football, or am I going to, if it's 3rd and short, what's going to happen? Because I've seen Ohio State do both things multiple times this year. Personally, to me, I would lean Will Howard as far as need a play, got to have it. I'm going to take Howard just based off of who I have on the outside he can throw to. I like the weapons a little bit more, obviously, for Ohio State. Not taking anything away from Indiana. I'm just saying that I think at some point talent kind of comes in as a factor, and I like Ohio State there. But something that Ohio State must do is they're going to need to have some sort of success running the football. They've been very up and down with running the football this year. I think it's kind of surprised a lot of people, including myself. I thought they would be one of the more dominant running teams in the nation. Based off, you bring Chip Kelly in, who has all of his expertise and background in this kind of stuff. And then you bring in Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss, but you also keep Travion Henderson another year. So you have this dynamic backfield, but it's just something has just not panned out with it. They've had really good games. They've also had games where it's like, what's happening? The Nebraska game, they had less than 80 yards rushing in that game. But then you look at like the Penn State game, they kind of took over a little bit. I need some sort of fluidity, some sort of consistency with it. because Indiana has a very, very good rush defense. And I mean, heck, they're the best in the nation statistically. First in FBS, they're only allowing 72 yards per game. Now, take that as you want because they haven't played anybody worth a damn that can run the football. I mean, even Michigan statistically is not very good at rushing the football, or running the football this year. I think 7 Big Ten teams they've played all rank outside of the top 60 in rushing offense. So they haven't played anybody that can challenge them, at least. That's not taking any away. Again, we're not taking anything away from Indiana. We're just saying that they haven't been challenged talent-wise, and I think a team that can actually run the football well enough, it's I mean, if Ohio State can go out there and average, 4.5 to 6 yards a carry, I mean, that's very good thing, very good sign for Ohio State. But if Indiana can kind of stonewall it and make it like a 2.5 to 4 yards a game, I mean, even that's not bad, 4 yards per carry. So, I mean, if Indiana can push it to like 3.5 to 2 yards a carry, I think Indiana has a really good shot at winning this game. I would rather take my chances at making Will Howard beat me with his arm than have those running backs take over the game. Because if they can do that, then you start going into milking the clock, just limiting possessions, because Indiana is a very high scoring offense. They want to put points up on the board. But if you go on these long drives like that, it really plays into Ohio State's hands right there. Ohio State is going to be dealing with a bunch of injuries. I believe their center McLaughlin's out this week. So it's just another injury to this already banged up offensive line that Ohio State's been dealing with all year. So they're going to have to shuffle those guys again. Something to keep an eye on right there. Again, you've already been up and down. You're 40th in rushing already this year, and you're going up against the top ranked unit in rushing defense. Something to keep an eye on right there. But as far as, again, the outside, if we're zooming out of this game and just looking at it from outer space, if you're the committee, what do you do? What do you do with each team if they lose? We'll take IU. I already talked about this a little bit ago. If they lose by the point spread or more, I don't think they deserve to be in the playoff. That's just my opinion. You take what the record is. I'm not someone that goes, you are what your record says you are. You got to look past that. Just because you're 11-1 doesn't mean that you deserve to be in. When you ranked 106th in strength of schedule, and then you lose the biggest game on your schedule by 2.5, 3 scores, that tells me everything I need to know. And if you're Ohio State, it would hurt Ohio State because that would become their second loss. It would also be they would also become now 1-2 against top 5 teams. I still think they would get in based off just having that Penn State win, assuming Penn State doesn't lose. But you would have no conference championship, bid, and then you would have the 2 losses. I still think they would find a way to stay in. Now, if they get blown out, then we have another conversation we got to be talking about. But again, if you're one of these SEC teams on the outside looking in, or like on the verge right there on the bubble, like you're rooting hard for Ohio State to take care of business right here and just make the committee do something with Indiana. Because then you make the committee reveal their hand, because I don't think the committee does not want this game to be a blowout, because then you have a mess on your hands. Because what you don't want happening is Ohio State winning 40-14, and then now you got to figure out how far do you drop Indiana, and are they even in consideration anymore? So a lot to be talked about there. I just think at the end of the day, as far as prediction goes, I like Ohio State to win this one relatively big. I like them to cover. I think it's a 37-20 game. So I'm putting the pressure now back on the committee to reveal their hand. Tell us what you want not to happen. Or let me rephrase that. You're going to better tell the world now what you're going to do with Indiana at this point. I just think talent at some point is going to take over. I don't think Indiana's been challenged at all this year outside of the Michigan game, maybe. They're going on the road in a hostile crowd, regardless of the time, because you can say what you want. It's Ohio State, I think 6th or 7th straight noon kickoff game.
That place is going to be rowdy and ready to roll. Give me the Buckeyes big, and I think Indiana's. I'm a listen. You know if you've been watching the podcast all season, we're fighting SIGs all day long, but at some point the flame goes out. That's all I'm going to say. All right, moving on. Don't look now, but we got a sneaky good game in the SEC this week, right here in Gainesville, Florida. It's a noon kickoff. It's senior day here in Florida on Saturday as number 9 Ole Miss comes to town take on the Florida Gators, who are seeking bowl eligibility. They're 5-5. Ole Miss looking to keep the train rolling here as they're coming off a bye following the big-time win against Georgia at home a couple weeks ago. Ole Miss is a 10.5-point favorite. Over-under sits at 55.5. All-time series, these two teams are deadlocked even, 10-1. Florida has won the last two, and Ole Miss is looking for their first win against Florida since 2009 or 2008, excuse me, when they beat the Gators here in Gainesville. That was the famous Tim Tebow speech after the game when he promised that they would not lose again and they would go on to win the title, and they sure as hell did. So the Rebels looking to get back in the win column against the Gators. So if you're Florida, what kind of keys do we need here to win this game? Well, I think protecting the quarterback is going to be first and foremost. Ole Miss will get after you. Let's just be clear cut about it. We do not need to cut corners. We don't need to, pretend or, cupcake things around, like spoofy it up, we'll call it. They're going to get after you. What are you going to do about it? Especially you have Lagway here. He's been dealing with that hamstring. I know he looked all right last week, but still, this is a different animal you're dealing with. Ole Miss, last 3 games, 23 sacks. They have 46 on the season. Centarian Perkins leads the group with 10. Walter Nolan has 4. Jared Ivey has 7. Princely Umen who makes his Florida return, has 9.5. These boys will get after you. They had 5 against Georgia. And that was obviously, you could tell that was a pretty rock solid. I mean, it's a decent O-line, but I mean, they're getting after you, and they're getting at the quarterback with rushing just 4. They're very rarely bringing a blitz or anything. It's nothing special. I mean, it's their best on your offensive line. They're not doing anything special. They're getting home and getting consistently home with just 4. I mean, they're averaging almost 5 sacks a game. So is Florida going to be able to hold up upright? I mean, because if you can protect the quarterback, then you can, get your deep shots down the field, because that's what Florida, honestly, the last few weeks with Lagway in has been. They've been a very, I want to say like a high risk, high reward type offense, but they've just been kind of like it's been a very explosive offense, but it's also been, they're not sustaining long drives or anything special. Lagway's numbers are going to be big, but if you look at like completion percentage and everything, like it's nothing crazy, because he's only completing maybe 12 to 15 passes a game, but he's lighting up this yardage number because he's hitting a bunch of deep shots. They do a good job at protecting the quarterback, but again, against certain opponents this year, they have struggled at times. The Miami game, Texas, Georgia game. They did do a pretty good job against LSU, but this is a completely different animal you're dealing with right now. I mean, I've seen Ole Miss a few times this year. What they've been able to do is just remarkable. This is one of the best. This is the best pass rush unit in the country, and Florida's will have their hands full on Saturday. Now, another thing you're going to need to do, and another thing that's going to be tough to do, they're going to have to be able to run the football. I talked about this a lot with the Georgia game against Ole Miss, because Florida doesn't rank very high either in running the football, but they're going to have to be able to run the football somewhat. They cannot become one-dimensional, and because Ole Miss is second in the nation in stopping the run, and if you just quit running the football, you're going to just go take a look at what happened with the Oklahoma game against Ole Miss or Arkansas or Georgia. You're going to let those pass rushers, again, pin their ears and get after you. There's a reason why they only need to rush 4, and they're still getting home, because they know what's coming. And once they know what's coming, it's kind of like a shark in the water when they can smell blood in the water. Once they smell it, you're done. It doesn't matter how far out they are. It's a matter of time. And that's what's going to happen here. If you cannot run the football enough with Jaden Baugh or Jacoby Jackson or even Montreal Johnson, who's starting to work his way back in, you're done. You are completely toasted. I don't care how well your offense has performed the last few weeks. You are toasted. Burnt like toast, baby. I think if you're Florida also, it's going to be important to getting a lead early. This is an offense that does not play well when they're trailing. They need to be playing either tied or ahead. Because falling behind will not be good. Because then you, A, get into obvious passing situations, which B, leads to letting that pass rush get after you. And if you get ahead early, I think too, with it being senior day and such, you're going to be able to get the crowd going. This crowd's going to be lively and ready to roll, especially because, they're looking to get bowl eligible. And they would love nothing more than do it in front of this home crowd. They did it last year, or they almost did it last year. They got ahead and they had a lead for most of the game against Florida State, but they couldn't hold on at the end. If you can somehow just keep a lead going, and this is a much better offense than it was last year at the end of the year, then you can start looking at, possible upset situation here. For Ole Miss, limiting the explosive plays on defense, we've been raving about how well their pass rush unit is, and it is. But it's also done a great job at covering up a lot of flaws that are in the back end. The secondary is not very good. They've played well at times, but they've also been gashed, and just it's like a hot knife through butter most of the time. DJ Lagway is top 3 in explosive plays as a quarterback, and this pass rush is ranked 83rd in the nation. They have some good guys back there like Trey Amos, but it's nothing special. And for the most part, the season, this pass rush has covered up a lot of flaws that have been back there. If Florida's O-line can hold up well enough and allow time for some of these deep shots to get down the field, then you're going to have success. But if you're Ole Miss, if you can just limit it and keep everything in front, if you're Ole Miss, I think if any team going forward against Florida, if you can force Florida to beat you on long drives, long sustaining drives, instead of just tossing everything, going four verts, play action, deep shots, and just getting home like that, if you can force everything in front and make them beat you going 75, 80 yards down the field each drive, I think you're going to have a lot better success beating this team. And that's what Ole Miss is going to have to do. They will force Florida to work their way methodically down the field instead of just getting everything in one or two plays. And then overwhelm Florida with your weapons offensively. You're getting Trey Harris back, which is a massive addition. But you also still have guys like Jordan Watkins. You have Caden Prescorn. Caden Lee's been stepping up lately. And you have Juice Wells. Not to mention Jackson Dart in the back as the quarterback. I mean, if he has time, he's going to pick this secondary apart. Surgically do it, and it's going to look very, very similar to how it has been the last few weeks. I mean, this is a pass rush for Florida that's played a lot better at the last few weeks, for sure. They've been forcing turnovers, been getting after the quarterback. They had 7 sacks last week against an LSU offensive line that had only allowed 6 on the season. But if you give Jackson Dart time, he's going to do – Lane Kiffin and him are going to dissect you. They will just lay you down on the operating table and just go to work. And this is a pass defense that's 93rd in the nation. So they will have their hands full for sure. I just think there's too many weapons that Ole Miss has that's going to overwhelm Florida, I think. And they don't even need to run the ball that effectively. I think if they just run the ball just well enough, avoid obvious passing situations. But even when you get into that, Ole Miss has showed that they could still convert. And with Kiffin, if it's fourth and manageable, he's going to go for it. So if you're Florida's defense, you've got to be ready for all 4 downs. It's not just get him to 4th down and hope for a punt. Like, it better be 4th down and long. Otherwise, he's going to be going for it. So no down is safe against old Kiffin. Speaking of score predictions, though, I don't know how I transitioned to that, but Ole Miss, I like to win 31-17. I just think this pass rush is going to be too much. I think it's going to overwhelm Florida, and especially with a limited quarterback mobility-wise with Lagway. I worry with him being able to get any sort of rhythm going, and I just think this defense for Florida is going to get overwhelmed, And it's going to be too much Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss to win big, 31-17, and spoil the Gators senior day. All right, moving on now. Number 14, BYU, heading to number 21, Arizona. Sorry. ASU -3, over under 48.5. Both teams still realistically in the Big 12 title race. Both teams need to win out. BYU cannot afford another loss. Likewise with Arizona State, if they want to have everything in front of them like they do, they still want to achieve those goals. They need to win. Can BYU stop Cam Scatabo? Because he's been on a run this last couple weeks. 198 carries, 1,074 yards. He's averaging 5.4 yards a carry. He has 11 touchdowns on the season. But it's what he's done recently. Last 5 games, Scatabo has 641 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's averaging almost 6 yards a carry. And he's going up against a BYU run defense that is middle of the pack, giving up almost 140 yards a game. So it's a good matchup for Arizona State. But if BYU can maybe limit the run enough, maybe you can catch Arizona State, get them one-dimensional. But I lean Arizona State there. But which offense is going to have a better day? I think this is a high-scoring offense or high-scoring game in total. Both teams have top 50 offenses. Both teams have nothing, not star-studded playmakers, but good enough playmakers. BYU with Jake Retzloff at QB, but you also have Darius Lassiter, Chase Roberts on the outside. For Arizona State, you have Scatabo, you have Sam Levitt, who's played really good football these last few weeks. He had a great game last weekend when Scatabo really was limited running the football. He was coming back from injury, but limited enough where Sam Levitt was picking apart Kansas State. But you also Jordan Tyson, and then you have tight end Charmin Medemeyer. These are so good weapons that Arizona State has that I tend to like both BYU as well. And finally, can BYU force turnovers? This is going to be a sneaky, maybe underlying stat that nobody's really talking about looking into this game. BYU very good at forcing turnovers defensively. They have 22 on the season and rank 6th in the nation. Arizona State doesn't turn the football over, though. They are 8th in the nation at turnovers, turnovers lost, which is really good. You want to be the higher the number, obviously, the lower the turnovers you have on this year. They only have 7 turnovers lost this season. So which one's going to give? It's kind of like how I'm going to talk about in this next game with Notre Dame and Army. So a lot of these stats are really good polar opposite wise, whether it be, one team's really good at scoring, the other team's really good at defense. Which one's going to give, I feel like? Because if BYU can force some turnovers and make this thing ugly, then that's going to lean BYU. Because then you're going to quiet that crowd, which is going to be one of the biggest crowds in Arizona State history. And you're just going to take all the momentum away right there. But if you're Arizona, if you can keep this a clean game, run the ball, and take care of business, I like Arizona State to win this one. And that's exactly why I have them winning this game 27-20. I think Arizona State's going to be able to take advantage of this hostile, rowdy, revved up crowd. This is one of the biggest games in Arizona State history. What Kenny Dillingham has done, just turning this program around from the dead since taking over last year, has been awesome. I mean, they were left for dead this year, and they've been on this wild run. And I don't see how it stops Saturday. Give me the Sun Devils to beat BYU and watch BYU fade into the sunset as far as being in playoff contention. So, all right, moving on. Number 19, Army. We are always go Army, beat Navy on this podcast, and it's been a magical ride as the number 19 Black Knights take on the number 6 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This game is at Yankee Stadium. We already talked about how Notre Dame doesn't like to play away games, so they just get neutral site games. Here we go. Here comes their third and final one of the season. It's a must-win for both teams if they still want to be in playoff contention, because a loss by either is going to eliminate them. Unless Army maybe has a slim chance but if they lose, I bet you the committee's going to drop them out of the ranking. So it's going to be tough. But so they just need to win this one if they realistically want to have a chance. So with the point spread being north of 2 touchdowns, how does Army win this game? Well, they can't turn the football over. Navy turned the ball over 6 times against Notre Dame. Notre Dame scored, I believe, a touchdown on every
following every turnover that they created. Army cannot turn the football over if they want to have a shot and win this game. They have got to keep it a clean football game. You can force turnovers, but you cannot be, losing the football on your side. Well, Army is excellent at not doing that. They're first in turnovers lost this year. They only have 3 turnovers lost on the season. No, but again, we talk about polar opposite stats. Notre Dame, second in turnovers gained. They are creating turnovers at a significantly high rate. They have 25 forced turnovers on the season. So which one's going to give? Well, Army's going to play that triple option game. Well, if Notre Dame can crash the line and get through, speeding up the process, that's going to lead to fumbles. You saw in the Navy game. So if Army can keep it a clean game, that's going to be a big factor in this one. Can Army wear Notre Dame out running the football? Army is first in rush offense, 334 yards a game they're averaging. Their quarterback, Bryson Daly, has over 1,000 yards rushing. He's averaging 6 yards a carry, and he has 21 touchdowns on the season. That is second in the FBS behind Ashton Genty. Well, Notre Dame is 43rd in rush defense, middle of the pack. You're going up against the best. And this is the one stat Army can steal that Notre Dame can't match up with. Because if Army can go on these long drives and average 5 to 7 yards a carry, they have a logistic shot at winning this game. Keep it a clean game and you run the football, that can do one thing: eat clock. Time of possession is going to be massive in this game, and guess who ranks second in that category? Army. 34 minutes and average time of possession this season. Only ranked behind other fellow AAC member, Tulane. What do those two teams have in common? Well, they're both undefeated in conference play, and they're both going to be playing each other in a few weeks in the conference title game. So Army does a hell of a job at keeping their opponents on the sideline. They do a great job at not turning the football over, and they do a great job at running the football. I legitimately think that this is almost going to be a race to 20 points because both these teams have both of them have top 5 scoring defenses. Both teams are allowing less than 12 points a game. So who's going to get the 20, I think, is going to be the question. If it even gets to that point. Shoot, we might be looking at a 17-10 game, if that. I mean, this has low scoring game written all over it if they don't turn the football over. Because if Army turns football over a bunch, I mean, that's really the biggest thing. If Army turns football over a bunch and sets Notre Dame up inside Army territory 3 or 4 times a game on Saturday, then it's going to be all Notre Dame. If you're Notre Dame, though, outside of creating turnovers, if you can get a lead and force Army to throw the football, you're going to win this game. As is most of the case with all these, military schools. I mean, so we talk polar opposite stats here. Army is first in rushing. Guess who ranks dead last in passing the football? You guessed it. It's Army, ranked 133rd with just 85 yards per game through the air. They don't throw the football. Again, but when you're rushing for over 330 yards a game, you don't need to. But if Navy, or I keep thinking Navy because they play Notre Dame. If Notre Dame can get ahead, let's say they're up, 14-3. Well, maybe it starts creeping in the back of the play calling mind. Maybe it starts creeping into Jeff Monken's, head a little bit. Like, hey, maybe we need to, we'll still run the football, but maybe we got to start throwing the ball a little bit more. And then guess who's really good at stopping the pass? Notre Dame. They're ranked second in the nation. I mean, both these teams have are really good in a lot of key stats. But at the end of the day, as far as prediction goes, I'm just anticipating Notre Dame pulling ahead late in this one. I think Notre Dame wins that race to 20, and it breaks my heart because we are pro Army on this podcast. I'm assuming Notre Dame's going to force a turnover or two. It tends to be like that. It might be a late turnover that really just becomes the knockout blow and kind of just sinks Army into the abyss. But I like Notre Dame to win this one 24-13. I like Army to cover that number. I love Army getting a bunch of points. Definitely will be on the best bet train. We've been riding Army all year. But I think Army covers, but I think Notre Dame's going to pull ahead late and win this one. This could be a close game until the very end, but give me the Fighting Irish. I would not be shocked at all if Army plays a clean, efficient game and gets to the fourth quarter. Army might win this game. So, all right, moving on now to around the country. Sorry, some of yours is favorite topic. I can only assume I don't get much feedback. So, but we know the drill around the country. We're going to get in the plane and fly around and see all the other big games of the weekend that maybe are headliners, but we're still going to talk about them. Number 13 SMU is at Virginia, a very pesky Virginia team that certainly could do some damage to SMU if they find a way to beat them. Number 25 Illinois is at Rutgers. Talking about Illinois, well, Penn State needs them to win out because realistically right now that's their best win. And so if they lose, then Penn State doesn't have a ranked win against anybody. Kentucky at number 3 Texas. Let's see if Texas can get past Kentucky team. I would assume so. Number 4 Penn State is at Minnesota. The Golden Gophers playing better football lately. Can they pull off the big one? That's all I'm going to think about. Speaking of pulling off big ones, number 16 Colorado's at Kansas. Kansas has been the masters of upsetting teams that have any aspirations of getting to the Big 12 title game. As of late, they took care of BYU and they took care of Iowa State. Colorado comes to town now. Can Colorado go in, take care of business? They've been pretty good this year on the road. Can they do that, or will Kansas be the next? Can Kansas take care of its next victim in a sense? Wisconsin's at Nebraska. Which team's going to get to bowl eligibility there? Number 12, Boise State, in this week's edition of Who Does Ashton Jeanty Play and What's Their Rushing Defense Stat line. Wyoming is the next candidate. Wyoming steps up to the board as the 116th rush defense. So I expect Ashton Jeanty to have himself a nice day out there in Cheyenne. Number 7, Alabama is at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is 133rd in sacks allowed. Alabama is 58th in sacks, averaging 2 a game. So I look for the Crimson Tide to get after the quarterback. If Alabama falls in, the only part where worries me with Bama is possibly can their offensive line hold up against a top 10 sack unit in Oklahoma. But I think Jalen Milroe's legs are going to be too much of a factor here. But if I think Oklahoma needs to force Jalen Milroe to beat him over the top and with explosive plays. I think Oklahoma can do that. I think Oklahoma's defense is good enough to keep them in this game. If they can get after the quarterback some and get this to the fourth quarter somehow, then you know anything's up for grabs. But I just think Alabama's going to overwhelm them. Number 15, A&M, Texas A&M is at Auburn. So everyone gets these weaker schedule type, weaker opponents this week. And, getting ready for conference rivalry or conference championships, rivalry week coming up next week, big games next week. And Texas A&M has Texas next week. So, who do they get? Well, they get to go to Auburn. Congratulations. And they're so ready and looking. They're not looking ahead. No, they're definitely, you couldn't be looking ahead. It's not like Mike Elko said that they're all of his attention right now is on Texas. He meant Auburn. What? Can't be saying that in the press conference. That kind of told me everything I need to know that they're not really looking at this game as a big time game. In my opinion, they're all looking ahead. This is a big letdown spot, look ahead spot at its finest. If there was ever such thing as a look ahead spot, you're going to see it on Saturday. I would lean Auburn possibly to upset A&M. I like Auburn to win this one. It's a Saturday night in Jordan-Hare. Weird things happen there. Give me Auburn. I would take Auburn to win right now. A&M's only like a 2.5 point favorite. Give me the Tigers to win that one. Vanderbilt's at LSU. Which team's going to show more fight? And USC at UCLA. I like UCLA to win this one. They're getting like 4.5 at home. Give me UCLA to win that one. And speaking of who we like to win games, it's now time for everyone's favorite, what do we call these? Topics. I think I just said that with around the country, but now it's time for best bets. Guys, I know we went 0-4 last week. I took care. I, being the humble man I am, took full responsibility for it. We have no excuses. We got to be better. Now, Looking at trends, though, this year, we had coming off bad weeks. I've been pretty good. Our last bad week, we went 1-3-1, bounced back ahead of 5-2 weekend. We're 32-22-1 on the season, and I expect us to bounce back this week. I like the board a lot better than it was last week, so that's already good news. This week's picks: Ole Miss versus Florida. I like the under 55.5. Texas Tech takes on Oklahoma State. I like Texas Tech to win -3.5. Army plus 14.5. That's too many points. Arizona State and Colorado, I both like at -3. And Alabama -13.5. I think too much Crimson Tide. Plus, you're giving me the hook right there. I'll take it. And then UCLA plus 4.5 in the nightcap. We've been pretty good at nightcap games this year, so I'd like to keep that rolling with UCLA. So those are the picks of this weekend. We're going to make some money, and we're going to bounce back in a big way. And with that being said, it is finally time to unfortunately say goodbye to all of you watching, listening, wherever you are. Thank you so much, guys, for watching the podcast. I hope you guys enjoy your Week 13, and we gear up here for the home stretch here. We've been gearing up for a while now, but we are finally in that home stretch type of this part of the season. So, all we can do is cross our fingers, maybe hope for a few more upsets, and see what happens. A lot of teams hoping now. We're in that part of the season now where a lot of teams now are in the need the other team to lose type of part. So, Tennessee fans. Tennessee is big Indiana, big Notre Dame fans this week. So a lot can happen. A lot will happen as it usually does here in college football, because it being one of the most unpredictable sports out there. And I can't wait to see what happens. So make sure you guys are subscribing to the podcast. We're trying to get to 200 subscribers. Make sure you guys are doing that. Liking, sharing the videos on YouTube, listening and following on Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get it, excluding Apple Podcasts. So make sure you guys are doing all that. I'll be back next time for Week 13 recap. And until then, this is College Football Talk. I'm Hunter DeLauder.